Hello and welcome to Wundef TV and to another edition of our Minerals Governance series. Today we address one of the commonest questions that Ghanaians usually ask. Why is Obuasi or Takwa not like Johannesburg? And to help me do this discussion is Mr. Richard Kojo Ellimah, who is the Executive Director for Center for Social Impact Studies. My name is Justice Mensah. You're welcome. Good afternoon, sir, and welcome to the program.
Thank you.
We start by asking, why is Obuasi or Takwa not like Johannesburg?
I think that's a multi-billion-dollar question. And I've also heard people ask the same question. And if you remember, somewhere last year, the president of Ghana, Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo, also
alluded to that.
Asked that same question. Yeah. And he expressed frustration that after so many years of mining, Obuasi, Takwa, Pristia are nowhere near the kind of mining cities that we all dreamt they would be. So it's a very important question that everybody has been asking. And I'm glad people are asking it because once we keep asking, it also opens the door for answers to be given and to influence the policies that we make for the mining sector. There are several reasons why Obuasi is not like Johannesburg. But historically, if you check when we started mining in Obuasi and Takwa, and when I talk of when we started mining, I'm referring to the era of industrial mining. Though mining has been ongoing for hundreds of years, but then when we started industrial mining, I think that was in the early 1880s. That was when industrial mining became prominent in Ghana. In Obuasi specifically, it started in 1897 when Ashanti Goldfields Corporation was formed. They bought the concession from those two indigenous fancies. So if you check when mining started in Johannesburg and when mining started in Obuasi or Takwa, we are all within the same time frame. Now, if you look at Johannesburg now, and Takwa or Obuasi now, the gap is so wide. I'm not sure of the expectations of our fathers, those who designed our policies and all that. But then, what is evident and what is clear is that we haven't managed our resources that well as compared to South Africa. Before I get into the answers, I must also add that South Africa's own history played a part in it. That is the apartheid history. They were under apartheid rule for so many years until 1994 or so, thereabout, when they elected Nelson Mandela as president. Yes. So we need to put that in context. But by and large, the first thing I will say is that for every country to derive maximum benefit from its mineral resources, you will need to look at your policy framework. What kind of policies exist in the mining sector that drive development? What kind of rules, what kind of laws have you passed? And what do the laws say about mining in the country? What is the policy objective of the government in power at any point in time for the mining sector? What do we hope to achieve by mining? And what vision have we carved out for the mining sector? How do we see the sector in 20 years, in 50 years? That for me is critical, because if you get the policy wrong, everything else will be wrong.
So is it that all this while we've not been asking some of this question you are asking now as a nation?
We ask, but I think probably what we haven't done is to gather the courage to sit down and then provide the answers. We had a mining policy only, I think, in 2010 or 2015. I'm not too sure of the date, but only quite recently. We've been mining for so many years, and we only got a policy only recently.
So all these years, what have you been doing as a
We're mining without a policy. And that is why I told you that the policy...
I didn't see anything wrong with that.
Well, everybody knew it was wrong, but we still went ahead and did it. I mean, and if you look at the policy formulation process itself, it was flawed. Usually you will have a policy, and the policy will guide the lawmaking process, the act that guides the mining sector. But in our case, we passed a Minerals and Mining Act in 2006.
Just 2006?
Yes, 2006. That was the latest law on mining we passed. And then we passed the law first before we did the policy. So obviously what we then did was to carve out the policy to suit the law we have passed.
So by doing that,
no,
what were you thinking? What were you thinking?
Well, I don't know. I just don't know. But it's a mistake that we made.
Okay.
I mean, we should have got a policy first. And the policy should have outlined our vision for the sector. That should have been in the policy. And then that vision for the sector would then guide the law-making process in the formulation of the act, that the parent act, that's the Minerals and Mining Act 703. No, okay. But unfortunately, we did it the other way around. But be that as it may, we have a policy now and we have a law. So if you check the law, what does the law say about mining? What does the policy say about mining? If you check the Minerals and Mining Act, for instance, there are several provisions in the law that will explain why Obuasi has remained the way it is. Several provisions explain why Takwa is the way it is. And until we are bold enough to change these portions of the law, it will be very difficult for us to make a headway. First of all, if you go to South Africa, their mines were indigenous mines. When they started mining, it was South African companies that were doing the mining. Not foreign companies. No. At that time, they didn't have multinationals. So local companies started doing the mining. And once you have a local company doing the mining, the resources remain in the country. Yes. Capital flight was minimal. Secondly, because of the apartheid regime, the South African government had been ostracized by the world. A lot of sanctions on the government. So basically, the South African government couldn't have traded with a lot of countries around the world. So they needed to think outside the box and then do things to support their own economy. So that also explains why they had to use ingenuity, for the sector and for the sector to also grow.
To help develop.
Exactly. So come back to our part of the world. The first company that we had to do industrial mining in Ghana, in Obuasi, it's Ashanti Gold, a British company. Sir Edwin Atakid, he formed Ashanti Gold Corporation. Now, the thing is that once the company operates, whatever profit they made, they took it back to Britain. And mind you, at the time we were under colonial rule, we didn't have systems in place to check capital flight and a few other stuff that could have also benefited the economy. So they virtually didn't follow through any local content procedures as we have now. So they did everything, they mined, they got the gold, and then they repatriated everything. So they left us with the legacy, the negative environmental legacy.
Impact of mining.
But then the positives, which was the profit they made, they kept it outside, unlike South Africa. So in the South African economy, they had money to circulate, money to do other things within the economy. Yes. The second thing is that there were support companies that sprang up in South Africa to support the mining industry. So,
and those support companies were local companies?
They were all mining South African companies. They were all South African companies. So they got companies that manufactured their boots, safety boots. They had companies that supply the chemicals.
Unlike in our case, where
in our
we
case,
import all
even
these
the
things.
Supply companies we have here are foreign companies.
But Ghanaian based.
Yes, but they are based in Ghana here. And every single one of the items they supply to the companies, they import. Yes, they import them. So it's more of the foreign exchange attrition. A lot of money goes out, and very little stays in the economy. Now, when you have a very strong support industry that supports the mining industry, what you do is that you increase employment generation, you increase local revenue generation, there's foreign exchange retention in the economy, and then the economy will begin to pick up and grow. So it also led to industrialization around industrial mining. So a lot of factories had to be built to manufacture all those things that
feed the mining
industry. If you come to Ghana, after over 100 years of mining in Obuasi, we don't have a single factory in Obuasi here that supplies even Anglo Gold. But mind you, before you come in, mind you, there was a time Anglo Gold Ashanti, at that time, Ashanti Gold Corporation, they used to employ about 10,000 people. 10,000 workers, yes, in the 90s.
Okay.
There was a time they employed 10,000 workers. Imagine each one of these workers needs safety boots, helmets, and all that. If
and
we had a factory here,
boots and helmets are being produced locally.
If we had a factory here producing it, couldn't the money have remained here?
Okay.
Couldn't there have been employment? And couldn't we have had other auxiliary industries also springing up? So that is the difference.
But looking at what you just said about South Africa is just next door. And they've been able to do all these things. Is it that we fail to learn from them or what?
The failure, I think, is we still come back to the earlier point I made. Okay. What is your vision for the sector?
Is it that we didn't have clear vision for the mining
There was nothing
sector?
like that.
We were just mining.
Let's go back to history. In the 1983, we went to the World Bank, IMF, the Bretton Woods institutions. Okay. They helped us to develop the first mining law, PNDC Law 153. Okay. And the law itself was very liberal in nature. Now, when the government went to the IMF, one of the key things, most notable things they told the government then, the PNDC regime, was the mining sector holds the promise for a revival of the Ghanaian economy. If you get the mining sector right, it will kickstart the Ghanaian economy. So a lot of focus was placed on the mining sector.
It means that we did all we could to help the mining companies to thrive and thrive well.
The focus of the government at the time was to make the mining sector much more attractive.
Okay.
Mind you,
to foreign investors.
Yes. Prior to that, we had the state-owned mining companies, SGMC, State Gold Mining Corporation.
And how were they doing? The state-owned mining companies, were they doing better then?
Not really, not really. I mean, they had been deprived of funds. Okay. There was mismanagement, because of course, you know our history with state-owned companies and all that.
They're not good at managing our own.
Exactly. So all those things were going on, and we needed to revamp them. But instead of revamping them, then the IMF advised the government that divest these companies, sell them to foreign companies, let them run the mining sector. And that mantra of government's business is not to do business came in. So our focus was, how do we make the mining sector very attractive? One, divest yourself of all these assets
that you have.
State-owned mining assets. Two, lay off redundant labor. I mean, they call them redundant labor. I mean, there were thousands of people who were employed by the state-owned mining companies, so they were laid off. And then we also had issues with our environmental standards, at the time, and so on. So there were a lot of things that we decided to do, and then we reduced taxes. We did away with a lot of the taxes. We reduced our shareholding structure. Yes, under state-owned mining companies, we had 100% shares. Now we had to reduce the 100% shares to 10%.
Just 10?
Yes, just
from
10%.
100 to 10?
Yes, yes.
You mean that we gave 90% away?
Of course, yes. It was a way of attracting these foreign companies. And indeed, a lot of foreign companies also came to Ghana. A lot of them came.
Because the grounds were fertile for them.
At a point in the Takwa area, they had as many as 8 multinational mining companies.
8?
Yes, in that Takwa enclave alone, multinationals. So we lowered everything just to attract them. Okay. We didn't look at the other side. What were we also getting in return? We basically didn't even look at it. And it went on from 86. We passed the Minerals and Mining Law, PNDC Law 153 in 1986. Then we used that law for 20 years. In 2006, after 20 years, we decided to change the law. We changed the law, and we maintained those incentives that were in the PNDC Law 153. We still maintained them. Yes.
So what was the need?
Again, we wanted Ghana to be an attractive place for mining investment.
Attractive.
Yes, that is what governments always say from the 80s till now. So if you check Section 29, for instance, the heading is additional incentives.
Additional?
Yes.
We're adding more to them.
Companies had, they cleared their mining equipment and goods from the port free of charge. VAT, they lived in furnished accommodation free of VAT, they did not pay VAT, they had an expatriate quota, a lot of other incentives were given them just for them to come in. Royalty rates, we made it a sliding scale. 2011, we changed the law, we fixed it at 5%.
5%.
Yes. Then sections 48 and 49 of the Minerals and Mining Act, we had a stability agreement, development agreement. Under the stability agreement, the development agreement, we said, well, if you are coming in with $500 million, then you are entitled to a development agreement with government.
Okay.
Simply means that within a period of 15 years, I mean, conditions existing in the country regarding mining, they will put a hold on it for you. So you will enjoy everything
for 15 solid
for 15 years. So even if we change anything in the country regarding mining, and that is negative, it doesn't affect you.
You are not affected.
You are not affected. That is why, as we talk, Anglo Gold, Ashanti, Newmont, and Gofos Ghana, they all still pay mineral royalty of 3%. Even though the law says they should be paying 5%, they still pay 3%. Now, if you have this kind of arrangement, if you have this kind of regime, how then do you become like Johannesburg?
Wow, the discussion is getting interesting. You are still on Wundef TV, and my guest is Mr. Richard Kojo Ellimah, the Executive Director for Center for Social Impact Study. We'll be back. You are welcome back from the break. So, sir, let me ask you, do you think it's about time we take a second look at some of our laws concerning the mining sector?
Absolutely, absolutely. If you look at the fact that we've been using this law for the past 13 years. Okay. We passed it in 2006 and we are in 2019. We've been using it for 13 years. I think it's high time we had a second look at it, and it's for obvious reasons. Number one, conditions that were existing in the country in 2006
are not the same.
Are not necessarily the same we are experiencing now. Okay. Things have changed. The sector, I mean the mining sector globally, has also gone through some changes. The price of gold keeps fluctuating, and a lot of factors have arisen in the international market that have made mining, mining has now evolved into something else. Now we are seeing a lot more mergers, acquisitions in the mining sector. So the industry itself is evolving. So government should also reposition itself
to suit
exactly and to take advantage of some of the opportunities that come from the sector. So we will need to have a second look at our laws. And the first place we probably have to look at the incentives we give to the mining sector. I am not against mining investment. Okay. Far from it, I am not. I mean, if any genuine investor wants to come and mine our resources, they are welcome to do so. Okay. But then, for our Ghanaian officials who negotiate with them, they need to be mindful of our national interests. They need to be mindful of our national interests. Some of the mining agreements we have seen have virtually been like giveaway. We've virtually given our resources away to them.
Parcel everything.
Yes, and giving them, and we are getting virtually nothing from them. So we will need to have a second look at it. We will need to also look at our mining policy itself. Let's go back to the parent document, have a look at it, and have a second vision of what we want mining to do for us.
Because we succeeded in making the sector attractive enough for this multinational
company. Absolutely. I mean, Ghana,
because that was our primary focus.
In the 80s, I mean, let's go back to our history. In the 1980s, because the reason why we were rushing to get foreign investors and the reason why we were prepared to lower all standards just to attract them was that investors were complaining that there was political upheaval in the region. Mind you, in the 80s, we had a military rule. Chairman Rawlings came in 1981. Prior to that, there had been several coups d'etats. And there were still, doubts about whether Chairman Rawlings will stay for long or somebody else will come and then overthrow him. There was uncertainty, and political uncertainty is very bad for business. Very, very, very bad for business. Apart from that, there was that economic instability. I mean, if you check our inflation rate at the time, it was horrible. And they needed to put a brake on inflation, on interest rates, and so on. So the government was desperate for investors.
We needed to do something.
Yes. We have practiced constitutional democracy for 27 years now. 27 years now. Uninterrupted political stability.
Now we are stable.
Now we are stable. Across Africa, everybody acknowledges Ghana has a very stable democracy. If you check our economy, in spite of all the noise we make, the noise from political parties and from everybody else, one thing that is clear is that our economy has been stable.
Okay.
We may not be where we want to be, but certainly we are not where we used to be.
Okay.
I mean, in the 80s, if you looked at how the economy was and you compare it to now we are doing far better.
We have evolved.
And then thirdly, our justice delivery system too is much stronger than it used to be. So investment disputes are easily handled by our courts, and those who are not even satisfied are free to go outside the country and seek justice from international judicial bodies. So all these factors
we are
exist.
Up there.
Yes, we are up there. So why can't we package our resources, go to the negotiating table with these strengths, and then bargain from a position of strength, rather than always playing that small child at the table, crying for the crumbs that fall to the ground?
Is it that we are being lazy?
I think we are not thinking outside the box, and we are not. We need bold leadership in the sector. We need bold leadership. We need a certain kind of orientation that says that we own the resources. We have a history of mining. We have the human resource. The human capital is there. If you are coming in with your financial capital, let's play the game fairly. On an equal turf. Let's play the game fairly. You know, once you go with that posture, I'm sure you can come up with something. We are seeing that kind of posture in places like Tanzania, in Guinea. Guinea, when they got a new president, he has rewritten the new mining law and all that. So we are seeing that kind of bold leadership elsewhere. So in the mining sector in Ghana, we need to also see that kind of boldness in changing a lot of things. I'm sure even if you talk to the industry themselves, players themselves, they will tell you that, look, the mining law we have now also doesn't suit them. So it's an opportunity for all of us to have a review of the law and get a law that will be a win-win one for all of us, rather than one that is skewed to the investor, to the disadvantage of the communities.
So now let's come back to the issue of Obuasi. Why is Obuasi not like Johannesburg? Why is Takwa not like Johannesburg? What can we do to make sure that we bridge that gap?
I ask a key question. How much money comes to Obuasi from mining? How much money comes to Obuasi from mining? Elsewhere, they mine it, and then the revenue distribution model they have, if you go to areas like Chile and so on, the sub-national level, in Ghana we will call them the districts. District level. They keep a greater percentage of the revenues that come from the sector. In our case, government keeps the larger share of the money that comes. So, for instance, take mineral royalty. The formula is quite complex. But whatever monies the companies pay as mineral royalty, which is the 5%, government keeps 80% of that money.
80% of the 5%?
80% of the 5% they pay. So let's take actual figures. So assuming Anglo Gold Ashanti, just an assumption. Assuming they pay $100,000 as mineral royalty. So government keeps 80% of that. So government keeps 80,000 of that amount. And the 20,000 that remains is distributed according to a certain formula. So that formula is that the Office of Administrator of Stool Lands keeps 1%, and then the remaining
of the remaining 20%.
Yes, 1% of the remaining. They keep 1%, and then the remainder is shared between the district assemblies, the traditional authorities, and other institutions like Minerals Commission, University of Mines and Technology, Geological Survey Authority, and so on.
So if you say the district assembly, do you mean the district which hosts the mining companies?
Yes, the districts which host the mining companies, the impacted districts. Yes. So in Obuasi, it wouldn't be Obuasi Municipal alone. We have Obuasi Municipality, Amansia Central. Now I think Bekwai is no more part of it, and Akrofum, and so on.
And what is their percentage in that 20%?
I think it's an internal arrangement they do. Obuasi, they meet and then they have a formula they use to share.
So it means virtually the districts are getting nothing comparatively.
Exactly. So virtually very little comes back to the districts. Now,
But
what
they are the
can you
people
do?
who feel the impact
Precisely,
most.
precisely. So the question is, what can you do with that little that comes back? Very, very, very minimal comes back.
So that answers the question why Obuasi is not
Precisely,
right.
precisely. So the district assemblies are the agents of development,
Okay.
but they are not getting the revenues they need. They are not
That will
getting the
help
monies
them
they need
develop.
to push the kind of development that we want to see. Everybody wants to see Obuasi, Ariankwanta, Kumasi Road, a dual carriage lane, but there's no money to do it. Everybody wants to see all internal roads in Obuasi paved with asphalt. But where is the money to do it? There's no money.
So sir, to correct this, we need to change the formula we used to.
We need to, in my considered opinion, I think the 80% government keeps is too much. If government can shed off part of that 80% and add it to what comes directly to the districts, I'm sure the districts will have enough revenues to be able to undertake the kind of development that we see. It is very shameful that after 120-something years of mining, some areas in Obuasi still use boreholes. I mean, it shouldn't. We should have a reliable pipe system. We should have a reliable healthcare system, reliable educational system, and so on. But all these cost money. But if monies are made available to the districts, I am sure they will then be able to push the development agenda that we are seeing.
The discussion is getting interesting. We'll pause here for a break. We'll come back and continue. You're welcome back. I still have with me here Mr. Richard Kojo Ellimah. Sir, you mentioned a lot of laws or regulations that we need to change. If you are given the opportunity to change our current laws now, what is that particular law that you want us to consider first?
It will be difficult to pinpoint any specific law, but what I can say is, just as I mentioned earlier on, we will need to have a second look at our Minerals and Mining Act. And we need to, there are 2 or 3 key things I want to see. First of all, let us review the kind of incentives that we have provided to the mining companies. That is number 1. And as an example, we will need to review probably the list of items that they can clear from our ports free of charge. Yes. We will also need to look at things like foreign exchange, or what they keep in offshore accounts. The law permits them to keep in offshore accounts. We'll need to have a second look at it.
Currently, I understand they have up to about 80%.
80, yes,
80%.
yes. That's what the law permits them.
80%.
And curiously, we have that in the law, but then when you take Newmont, for instance, prior to 2015, Newmont, we gave them that 100%, that they could keep 100% of their monies in offshore accounts. But we've reviewed that agreement we had with them in 2015, so it's no longer the case. Just like our 10% free carried interest that we have as a state in every mining operation. In the case of Newmont, we gave it away, but I think now it's been reviewed. So we need to look at all those set of incentives that we give out. As I said, conditions have changed, so we do not have to keep those incentives anymore. The second thing I want to see is also about those stability agreements. Are these relevant at all? I think we need to begin a conversation around, the stability agreement, the relevance of these stability agreements, where the companies are giving a lot of giveaways, in return for some things which are not even sustainable. I mean, Anglo Gold in their new agreement with government had almost $200 and something million, as a giveaway, and so on. So we will need to have a conversation around it. Is it beneficial to us? But if we look at it and in the light of the CD depreciation and all that, if we think it's still relevant to allow companies to keep foreign exchange outside, well, then it's something that we need to talk about. And then finally, we will need to also look at that portion of the law about small-scale mining. There are some problems with that portion of Minerals and Mining Act that talks about small-scale mining. Number 1, it doesn't even talk about artisanal mining. Artisanal mining is more culturally relevant to our people.
Okay.
That is what they've been doing for years, centuries, before the white man even came. But there's no mention of artisanal mining in the law. We need to look at it. And we should stop that kind of omnibus branding of everything small-scale mining, and look at the needs of those who are doing it for livelihood purposes, and then support them. And then we should also consider giving the small-scale mining sector at least half of the support we give to the multinationals. If we are to be giving these small-scale miners part of that support, I'm sure we can see a much more vibrant small-scale mining sector than we are seeing now. As it is, the small-scale mining sector looks like an orphan sector. We only hear about them when there's something wrong, when they destroy the environment. But apart from that, nobody is doing serious advocacy to ensure government helps them with access to finances, incentives that are given to multinationals and so on. So we need to have a rethink of our vision for mining in the country.
Okay. So, sir, in effect, what you are saying is that if we should review our laws, create local industrialization and support the small-scale mining sector, and make sure that more of the mineral royalties are returned to the local or the districts, Obuasi will necessarily become like Johannesburg. Is that the argument you are making?
Well, not completely, but by and large, if we do all these things that you've listed, we will be on the path to seeing a different Obuasi than we are seeing now. What is left will be that leadership. If we have all these ingredients, but we don't have effective and strong leadership, then we will still have all these factors there, but we will still not get to where we want to be. So all these factors plus leadership will see a very new Obuasi, an Obuasi that will either be like Johannesburg or at least come close to Johannesburg.
Sir, we are grateful for talking to us today. We hope to see you some other time.
Thank you.
That was Mr. Richard Kojo Ellimah. He's the Executive Director for Center for Social Impact Studies. My name is Justice Mensah. This is where we draw the curtain down on our today's discussion on why is Obuasi or Takwa not like Johannesburg. See you some other time.